Al Capone is one of the most notorious criminals in U.S. history. What did Capone do to become so infamous? What happened to him? In the 1920s, the passage of the 18th Amendment, which illegalized alcohol, gave rise to large-scale organized crime throughout the United States. These crime syndicates were responsible for bringing in much of the illegal liquor that was pouring into the country. This importation of alcohol made many of these criminals millionaires. The most notable of these gangsters was Al Capone. Al Capone was born on January 17, 1899 in Brooklyn. He was a talented student, but had great difficulty following the rules. He was expelled from school at the age of 14 after hitting a teacher in the face. After leaving school, he had a number of odd jobs, including working at a bowling alley, a candy store, working as a bouncer at a bar, and serving as a small-time boxing promoter. As Capone entered his early 20s, he moved to Chicago and became involved in the world of organized crime. He worked with John Torrio's gang, which was the biggest and most well-organized crime syndicate in Chicago. In no time at all, Capone became one of the top men in Torrio's gang. In 1925, Torrio was shot several times and retired, leaving Al Capone in charge. At the age of 26, Capone found himself as the head of one of the most extensive networks of bootleggers and illegal breweries in the nation. Throughout the 1920s, Capone continued to expand this enterprise and become unbelievably wealthy in the process. Capone became well known for his excesses, indulging in expensive food, drinks, cigars, clothing, and jewelry. Even more money was spent to avoid the law. To keep himself and his organization out of trouble, Capone spent millions of dollars bribing public officials. Judges, juries, police officers, and politicians were all paid off in order to ensure that Chicago's law enforcement officials would look the other way. Violence was also being used to further their law-breaking ways. Buildings were bombed and members of rival gangs were beaten or even murdered. For example, on February 14, 1929, Capone's men disguised themselves as police officers. They entered the headquarters of a rival gang and used machine guns and shotguns to execute 7 men. This incident became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. When news and pictures of the incident appeared in newspapers, the public was appalled. To crack down on Al Capone's illegal dealings, the Department of Treasury appointed a special task force to bring down Capone's operation. Eliot Ness was chosen to lead this team of law enforcement agents, which became known as the Untouchables. They were known by this name because it was said they could not be bribed or otherwise manipulated. The Untouchables began raids on the illegal stills and breweries and had a major impact on Capone's business. Ness estimated that they seized more than $1 million worth of breweries. This would be more than $13 million today. Eventually, the work of Ness and his fellow agents and IRS investigator Frank Wilson led to the end of Capone's illegal ventures. Capone was charged with 22 counts of tax evasion, as well as over 5,000 violations of the Volstead Act. This was the law that had enforced the 18th Amendment. Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison in 1932. He served out his sentence in both the Atlanta U.S. Penitentiary and the federal prison known as Alcatraz, which is just off the coast of San Francisco. After being released from prison, Capone lived out the remainder of his life in Florida. He died in January of 1947 after suffering from a stroke, cardiac arrest, and contracting pneumonia, all within a few weeks. Following Capone's capture and imprisonment, there was still much organized crime to be dealt with. J. Edgar Hoover, director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, appointed agents to track down and eliminate these other outlaws. These agents, known as G-men, short for government men, worked throughout the late 1920s and early 1930s to bring order to lawless cities such as Chicago and Kansas City. These were two cities that became well known for harboring gangsters. They even created a public enemies list, which stated the most wanted criminals in the nation. Al Capone was the nation's first public enemy number one. With the passage of the 21st Amendment in December of 1933, much of the lawlessness came to an end. Since alcohol was once again legal to make and transport, the criminal elements of the nation moved on to other illegal activities and receded into the darker fringes of society.